until they regain it, or somebody who's insane until they regain their sanity. It's just fair. I mean, why should somebody who is a child be held legally responsible? They don't have the capacity, the intellectual capacity to determine what is right and wrong. But also the physical body is important, because in order to fulfill the spiritual requirements and to be able to fulfill the commands of Allah intellectually, we need to be physically able, physically well. So well-being is important. Physical strength does not mean, to be all pumped up, all fully muscular, like a box, but rather to have well-being, to look after one's well-being. And that's why in the Islamic tradition, looking after our diet is so important. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, the meaning of which, that the worst container or the worst vessel that a human being can fill is their stomach. And it is enough for a human few morsels of food to keep him or her straight. But if they want to eat more, then it should be enough for them to fill their stomach, a third with food, a third with water, and leave the other third empty for breathing. And this hadith, Muslim scholars of the past said, and of course people say it now, this hadith, which focuses on diet and well-being, is the cornerstone of all medicine. Right? It is the cornerstone of medicine. And it is because Islam emphasizes this idea of well-being, and well-being doesn't, as I said, mean just physical strength, but well-being is totality. That is why in the hadith, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Allah Ta'ala did not send a disease, مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ مِنْ دَاءٍ إِلَّا وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُ الدَّوَاءَ فَتَدَاوُوا يَا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ. That Allah did not send down a disease, but He sent with it a cure. So search for the cure, O servants of God. Which is interesting, and perhaps this is the impetus for the Islamic civilization leading the world in medicine for almost 900 years, 1,000 years. And the medical textbooks, which were written by Muslim physicians like Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, remain the standard medical textbooks in Europe until around the 18th century. So it's only the last 250 years that medical textbooks which were compiled and written by people like Ibn Sina and Razi and others became no longer the standard textbooks. And what is interesting also is that the unique contribution of the Islamic civilization to medicine is that it made it scientific. It moved away from superstition and theory to experimentation. Anyway, so you have the intellect, you have the heart, and you have the physical body. And if you were to speak about which is most important, one would probably have to say the heart or the soul. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. On the day of judgment, neither wealth nor children, meaning possessions, will be of help to you, except those who come to Allah with a heart that is sound. And that's when we spent about 3-4 months looking at what does it mean to have a sound heart. And then we started talking about the diseases of the heart. And by that we mean the spiritual diseases. Just as the heart has physical diseases, equally from an Islamic perspective and other Eastern perspectives, it has spiritual diseases. And we spoke about some of those, such as hasad, envy. Envy is a spiritual disease. Nobody can teach you anything about envy at university or school. People don't talk about that, right? In fact, sadly, envy has become part and parcel of living. In the Islamic tradition, we say envy is so dangerous. It not only does it displease Allah, but it's a sign of the disease of your heart. It's a sign of the sickness in the heart, right? Because one who envies others for what Allah has already given them, because that's what envy is, hasad, is to envy somebody for what they have, either because you don't have it, or either because you have it, but you just don't like them to have it. And this hasad, the Prophet ﷺ said, it consumes good deeds like fire consumes dry grass. It eats it up. Hasad eats it up. But also hasad or envy eats you from inside. What I want to talk about today, so this is another form of diseases of the heart, a disease of the heart, and that is su'ul dhann billah. Su'ul dhann billah is to think bad of Allah. And I'll explain what that means. To think bad of Allah is to, for example, when Allah Ta'ala, as a believer, when Allah Ta'ala tests you with something, whether good or bad, because good is a test and bad is a test. Sometimes if He tests us in ways which are good, by giving us abundance, for example, or health, free time is considered something that is good. How do we respond? If you don't respond by being grateful, and if you don't respond by utilizing the favors that Allah has given you in a good way, in a way that pleases Him, then you are a person who have thought bad of Allah Ta'ala. A person who does not truly understand Allah and His expectations of Allah are problematic. Allah Ta'ala sometimes can test us with difficulties, and sometimes very difficult circumstances, and we respond by being despondent or aggressive or ungrateful or complaining against Allah's qadar, Allah's will. Why me? Most people would say, why me? And this is a sign of the fact that we have su'ul dhann billah. We have not thought well of Allah. The opposite of su'ul dhann, the opposite of thinking bad of Allah, is husnul dhann billah, is thinking good of Allah. The word dhann, the Arabs in the audience, the word dhann, you may think it means doubt. But in this particular context, dhann should mean yaqeen. So husnul dhann means husnul yaqeen billah, to have good certainty about Allah and good expectations of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this universe for us. His mercy, for example, encompasses everything. Allah's rahmah, Allah's mercy, encompassed us before we were born, and whilst in the womb of our mothers, and when we were born, and whilst living in this earth, His rahmah, His mercy. To think good of Allah Ta'ala is to know that this is from Allah Ta'ala. Whatever we have of bounties is from Him. The oxygen that we're breathing right now, it contains a lot of pollutions. There's a lot of pollution in what we breathe, but it is the rahmah of Allah, it is the mercy of Allah that He has protected us from much of these pollutants without our will or without our power. La hawla wa la quwwa. Right? We breathe. There is so much pollution, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects us from so much harm without us knowing, for example. And so husnul dhann billah is to think good of Allah and to expect nothing but good from Allah, even though circumstances may seem difficult and hardship may overcome us, and even though intellectually we may not understand why we are being tested, but good thoughts of Allah means whatever comes upon me, whether good or seemingly evil or bad, ultimately for a believer, it is good for them. As Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, عَجَبَا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ إِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ سَرَّاء شَكَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ ضَرَّاء صَبَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُ وَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. The Prophet ﷺ says, amazing or how wonderful are the affairs of a believer. For if good comes upon them, if favors come upon them, they are grateful, and that is good for them. And if difficulties come upon a believer, they are patient, and that is good for them. And that is only for a believer. In other words, the scholars say a believer, he flies or she flies with two wings. The wing of shukr and the wing of sabr. The wing of gratefulness or gratitude and the wing of patience. And we always say, or the scholars always say, it is not about whether we will be tested or not. We will definitely be tested. But the question is, how do we respond when we are tested? And our response is dependent on our thoughts of Allah and our certainty on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? How do we respond when we are tested? We will be tested. And test is either we will be tested in times of ease or in times of difficulties. Allah could give somebody so much wealth. That's a test to see what they will do with it and whether they are grateful. Gratitude, shukr, is of three types. The gratitude of the heart, to know from within that what I have is ultimately from Allah. And then that is expressed by the tongue when we say Alhamdulillah or Shukr, thanks to Allah. And thirdly and importantly, that gratitude then is expressed through action. And so the action of gratitude, in as far as wealth is concerned, for example, is to give zakah, or to give zakah or sadaqah, charity, or to spend it in ways which are good. Not to use wealth to become obstinate or oppressive or tyrant, but rather to, for example, in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, it's one of the beautiful hadith that on the Day of Judgment, Allah Ta'ala will bring a person and he is supposed to be destined to Jahannam, to hellfire. But because sending him to Jahannam, to hellfire, the angels ask, Allah says to the angels, ask him or her if they've done any good deeds. And they ask this person, have you done any good deeds? And he or she will say, I can't remember doing anything good. They said, except there was one thing I used to do. They said, what's that? Now Allah knows. Allah wants to demonstrate to us. He says, I used to lend people money. I had wealth and I lent people money. And when the due date for repayment came, and I sent my debt collectors, I used to say to them, I used to instruct my debt collectors by saying, if you find the person in difficult situation and cannot pay the debt, then don't press on it, don't press hard, give them more time. Or if you find it really difficult, in difficult circumstances, just forget it, forget the debt entirely. Now this is a quality in Arabic called karam or jud, generosity. The person was generous. Allah gave him wealth and he was generous with his wealth. So then Allah says to him, he says, so you were generous? He says, yes, I was, I think. Then Allah Ta'ala says, وَأَنَا أَكْرَمُ الْأَكْرَمِينَ, and I am the most generous of those who show generosity. I have forgiven you. Take him to paradise. Allah's karam. And this is part of husn al-dhan. Husn al-dhan, to think good of Allah, is to know that Allah is Jawadun Kareem. For example, to know that Allah is generous and kind. To know that Allah is Rahmanun Rahim, most merciful, most compassionate. To know that Allah is Al-Wadud, the most loving. Right? This is out of knowing Allah. And only when you know Allah Ta'ala that you will have this good thought of Allah, good thoughts of Allah Ta'ala. In fact, ulama say, Husnul Dhann Billah is of the most important aspects of Al-Adab Ma'allah. I'll explain. Adab, the word Adab in Arabic means, you could translate it simply in English to mean etiquette or manners. So the Arabs, when you say ta'addab, ya walad, it says, boy, have some manners. Alright? But I think adab has a more comprehensive meaning. Adab means to become a refined human being. The refinement of the human. But if we were to look adab to means the etiquettes and manners that one should uphold in order to become a refined human being, then the greatest adab a person should display is with Allah. Adab with Allah, adab with God. And this is very important in Islam. So for example, of the adab with Allah, of the mannerisms that we display with Allah Ta'ala, is for instance, never think that you are alone when nobody is with you. In the dead set of the night, when you are in your own room by yourself, and it's dark and there is nobody else, never say, Inni wahid, I am alone. But always say, Ma'iya raqib, I have a watcher over me. This is adab. Adab is to know your place with Allah. Right? Of the manners that we should have with Allah is that you never think bad of Allah. You never think, even though intellectually you may not comprehend or understand or explain certain phenomena, such as adversity or sickness or difficulties, you should always know that there is good in it, even if I don't understand it. And that's why the ulama say qadar is of 4 types. Qadar, one can translate it in English as decree, the decree of God, or predestined, which is not a very good translation. Qadar, the ulama say, is of 4 types. They say qadar khayrun hulm, a decree of Allah upon you that is khair, that is good and sweet for a believer. This is for believers. Good and sweet, for example, Allah gives you wealth. That's good. And it's sweet for you. You like that. And you don't need anyone to explain to you that this is good for you. Nor will you complain, oh my God, why did Allah give me so much wealth? Have you ever heard anyone say that? People will often say, why don't I have? But we don't hear people say, why did Allah give me so much money? People don't say that usually. People complain when they don't have. Nobody complains when they have.